Hello, everybody. Rue McDonald here from Queer Directions. And today I wanted to share a story, the coming of Angus and Briege. It feels like a very appropriate story to share at this time of Imbolc, and also feels very connected to my own personal healing journey at this time. And I hope it resonates similarly for you. I'm going to talk about the Cailleach and some of the associations that she has and some of the realms that she tends as a supernatural spirit of the land, and share snippets of stories as I've come to know them. Most of what I'm sharing is coming from a book called The Visions of the Cailleach, and I highly encourage you check out this book when you have a chance. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the connection between Cailleach and Briege, and then I'm going to dive into the story and just invite you to listen and invite any of your resonances and reflections in the comments in this video, below this video. So the Cailleach is an ancient earth spirit. I've come to know her as the tender of the wild. She is the sovereignty of the land and is often in a position where there has been some sort of disrespect to the land, and she is the accountability, coming in and saying, absolutely not. This cannot go forward in this way. She's like the boundaries around what good governance is and what it means to be in good relationship with the land. Is she's often teaching those really hard lessons. She is the well tender. She is the one that tends the well stone. So she's the one that moves it on and off and allows the water to come out and nourish the land. She also, in one story, does not come back one day. She falls asleep out while doing her duties and doesn't come back and doesn't put the well stone back on, which leads to this huge flood over the land, and many people die, a lot of livestock die, and she comes back and realizes what has happened, and she puts the well stone back on and turns herself into stone in repentance. This sense of responsibility is very alive for the Cailleach. Her responsibility for tending life, that she takes very seriously and holds very sacred. She is also the winds. It's said that she has 8 hags that she has at her beck and call, and they ride black goats, and they are the winds that go out in all the directions. And so she commands the winds that create these huge storms and these huge destructive, like taking down the limbs of trees. And those limbs, they go back to the soil, and they create this whole ecological cycling of energy. She is that whole cycle. She's also the cycles of the earth, like she is geological time. She's the movement of rock formations and the mother of mountains. There's a lot of stories of her carrying boulders in her apron, and as she walks across the earth, her footsteps become lakes, and the boulders that fall from her apron become the mountains, and the pebbles that fall can become sacred wells, and they can pierce through into the other world. And it said this water comes from the other world. So she has this association with the other world. A lot of this information I got from the Cailleach Herbarium, which is a website that I also suggest you check out. And around that wording that I just shared. And The stories that I offered just there, some of those associations mostly come from a book called The Visions of the Cailleach, which is where the story is going to come from. So I'm bringing together some different ideas, and I just want to speak now. I don't want to just be like taking and making something with what I've taken, but also the way that this is living into my life. I want to share that as well. And I feel like I've innovated. And the Cailleach has come into my life through a number of different initiations. She feels like a really initiatory type presence where she is the strong boundaries, and she is the destruction and the shedding, the quick shedding as well as the slow shedding of things that are no longer serving. The flooding, I feel like, is very connected to my experience with grief. She feels like someone who I connect with a lot in my grief work, because she tends the wellstone. There's this relationship that I feel with her where when I allow the water to flow, there's different ways that that water flows, and that water being like the grief body that I hold in my body. A dream that I had about a year ago. It was one of those dreams that just felt like it was over this like actually really long period of time. And in this dream, I was walking and I felt like this expanse of water that was beyond my corporal form, but I was carrying it in my corporal form. And as I was walking over this dry ground, this pebble fell from the sky and like crashed into my chest. And it just, I was struck to the ground, like I couldn't move. My body was just immobile. And this beautiful spring began to burst forth in like bubbles and gurgles, and just like streamed over my body and down onto the ground. And as I lay there immobile, I became the rock and moss, and that stream began to nourish the ground around. I hadn't even really noticed, but when I was walking, but the ground was quite dry. There wasn't a lot of life there, and so this water actually burst forth and supported the growth of this incredible forest. And I watched as everything grew. And in the dream, there was an old woman who came and was washing clothes in the river, and a young child with muddy feet came and washed their feet. It's just a really beautiful cleansing that I saw. Whereas in my dream, I had this feeling that what I was carrying was incredibly dangerous. Like I couldn't let it out. Um, but I loved how this experience just showed me how important it is to recycle. What the water became to symbolize was my grief, or the groundwater trauma that is held down deep. And by moving the wellstone, or that pebble, that fell, which I feel like fell from Cailleach's apron, burst forth this flooding. And I actually had pneumonia a little while after having that dream, and my lungs were full of water. I just felt like super, full of grief. And there was no container for when the grief was going to end. When was the grief tending going, like where was the container for the grief tending? I didn't have those skills yet. And also I think that the opening of this grief journey, this wellspring, felt really connected to my own embodied capacity for holding the grief. There was something in my journey at that time where it was like, okay, you're ready for the grief, here it all is. And so I had to stoke my inner fire. I had to fight against this, but fight against it is not, I had to work with it, right? I had to stoke my fire and actually evaporate that water out. And then I understand that to be like the cauldron of warming that sits in my lower belly. So stoking that fire, stoking my vessel, which is my body. So like body care was a big part of that. And eventually I healed from the pneumonia. And then the next initiation was these 2 car accidents that just like really took out my physical ability and my mental ability. I got a concussion, and so I'm still healing from that, but it's just been this huge process of accepting physical and mental limitation, and learning how to tend to my body, coming into a different relationship, embodied relationship. And so those are 2 type of initiation experiences that I've interpreted as initiations. And I've also used or related to these stories. I don't like the word used when relating to a story, because story is a being and I want to be in good relationship with these story beings. And so the way that I frame it is that, you know, I bring them to my altar, I'm in relationship with them, and they teach me a lot. One of the big teachings has been around having a container for my grief work, not to get lost in holding that water, not to get lost in flooding in that water, but to create containment for that work, for that metabolization, and then coming back and reorienting. And so I've seen the importance of ritual containment through these stories in my own experience. And I've also learned just the incredible power of life to just cause destruction and pain. And that's just how it is. There's nothing I can do about it. And with that destruction, the story and the imagery of the winds coming through and destroying limbs off those trees. I felt like one of those trees, and those car crashes were just like, those winds just whipped through, and that kind of destruction happened really quickly. And there was a lot of emotional turmoil and social turmoil. And then my body was just wrecked and needed to just really ground into the earth and build up my body little by little. Again, I had to fight for my survival, like, in some way, right? There's always Cailleach initiations are harsh. And so the story that I'm going to share today is the coming of Angus and Briege. And I'm going to there's a lot of elements of her as the wind in the story, which is why I'm sharing it, and I really like it. It's a story that was brought together by an author who I'll mention, who brought together stories like an Irish story and some Cailleach stories from Scotland, kind of smushed them together, took some creative licensing, which, just to be totally transparent about, and to make it like a seasonal allegory for the beginning of this time of year, the year of the wolf, the month of the wolf, which is February. And yeah, I guess I'll just dive in because I'm so excited to share this story with you. I'm going to invite you now, just as you're listening, to, if you would like, to center some loving presence in your body. Maybe you want to lie down. Maybe you want to just become aware of the chair or whatever's holding you up. And just take a moment to send some loving intention to the earth and up into the stars, and just feel that beautiful sensation of being held by the earth and constellations. I am the wind, I am the snow, I am the mist that hangs round low. I am the rain, I am the snow, I am the mist that hangs round low. I am the winds, I am the crone, with 8 black hands on 8 black goats. I am the rain, I am the snow, I am the mist that hangs round low. The Cailleach and Briege. So again, I'm reading from the Visions of the Cailleach, exploring the myths, folklore, and legends of the preeminent Celtic hag goddess. And this book is written by, just a moment here, it says Sarita Deste and David Rankin. Apologies if I've said that wrong, and apologize in advance for any mispronunciations. I really value the proper pronunciation, and I'm always learning. So all around Scotland, the tale was told in variant forms how the Cailleach Vera captured the summer maiden Briege, held her prisoner in the mountain hall beneath Ben Nevis, the tallest mountain in Scotland. The different elements of the tale were brought together by Donald Mackenzie in his book Wonder Tales of Scottish Myth and Legend, 1917. The Cailleach is said to reflect the bleakness of winter. Her skin is like purpley black and blue. She was like blue black in a winter, like a winter storm cloud, it says. Her white hair looked like twigs covered in frost, and her single eye glared out at the world like the winter sun. Love that. So the story begins, and the Cailleach has Briege hostage in this cave beneath this great mountain. And it is said that she was a cruel mistress and set Briege to impossible tasks, just absolutely so challenging. And Briege just had to bear it. She was under the control of the Cailleach Vera. And one of the tasks that Briege was given was to wash a sheep's skin that was muddied and brown, and she had to wash it in a freezing cold stream. The Cailleach had had control over that land for as long as anyone could remember at that point, and she would not give it up. She was not willing to let go of her power and to let go of imposing this winter on the land. And so the Brige goes out to go wash this sheep's fur, and she's putting it, she has to smash a hole in the ice. Hands are red and cold, and she's dunking it in and scrubbing and scrubbing and scrubbing, and it's just not coming clean. There's just no way. There's no warm water. There's just no way that she's going to be able to perform this task. She knows the Cailleach is going to be absolutely furious if she doesn't go back with a snow white, clean sheep's skin. And so as Bridget is crying over this muddied brown sheep's wool, an older man comes and emerges from the woods and comes upon her and asks, why are you crying? And Bridget explains, I am being held captive by the Cailleach Bera, and I'm being sent to this task, and there's no way I'm going to be able to do it, and I am terrified of her wrath. And the old man feels a lot of compassion for her and asks, and may I, and takes the fur, and he takes it and he thrashes it 3 times, shakes it 1, 2, 3, and on the 3rd shake it becomes totally white, pure white, perfect white sheep's fur, and gives it back to Bridge, and Bridge is absolutely overjoyed. Thank you so much. And the older man hands her a handful of snowbells and says, if Cailleach scolds you tonight, you just hand her these. And he said, if Bera scolds you, give her these flowers. And if she asks where you found them, tell her that they came from the green, rustling fir woods. Tell her also that the cress is popping up on the banks of the streams, and that the new grass has begun to shoot up in the fields. And so Bridge returns and, of course, was scolded by Bera, and Bridge repeated exactly what that old man had said, and Cailleach was thrown into a wild fury. And she sent her 8 hags, and she sent them to the north, to ride to the south, to ride to the east and the west, ride forth and smite the world in frost and tempest, that no flower may bloom and no grass blade may survive. I am waging war on all that grows. So in this version of the story, it says that the Cailleach is jealous of Bridget's beauty, and so keeps her captive, and also is aware that she is destined to fall in love with her son, Angus. And Angus is the antithesis of the Cailleach. He is warm, and he brings the sun. It's kind of like Lou in that way. He brings the sun with him when he comes, and in the summer months, he is alienated to the Emerald Isle, which we now know as Ireland. And although she's kept British in captivity, Angus has a dream, and he dreams of British, and he falls in love with her. He just knows that they're meant to be together, and because of this dream, he's just totally riled up. He's like, I gotta go and save British. Go save her from this cave. this dark, cold cave. And he goes to the king of the Emerald Isle and tells him that of his dream and what he's going to do. And the Green King of the Isle answers, "The fair princess whom you saw is Brige, and the days when you will be king of summer, she will be your queen. Of this your mother, Queen Bera, has full knowledge, but it is her wish to keep you away from Brige so that her own reign might be prolonged. Tarry here, O Angus, until the flowers begin to bloom and the grass begins to grow, and then you shall be free to go and find the beautiful princess." But Angus was just too excited. He couldn't wait. And so he decided that he would take 3 days from August and bring them with him. And so he decided that he would go right away during the month of the wolf, when he knew it was going to be even harder, because he's a solar being and really has a lot. He struggles when it is cold. He struggles to keep up his strength, and so he borrows these 3 days and goes out to find Brige. And he goes and he can't find her. So he brought the sun with him, and he couldn't find her. And then Cailleach sees him and just like sends him right back to where he came from. And he wasn't able to find Brige that time. And the next time he goes, he tries again, and he brings another few days from the summer with him, and he ends up finding her. And this is known as Brigid's Day. When he finds the princess, is the first day of spring, is when Angus finds her. And they are accompanied by the Fae, the good people, and their union is celebrated. They're married, and they hide back. They return back to Ireland together, but Angus begins to miss his homelands. He begins to miss Scotland, and so he tries again. And so Bera raises storm after storm to drive him away. And first she calls on the wind named the Whistle, which blew high and shrill and brought down the rapid showers of hailstones. It lasted for 3 days, and there was much sorrow and bitterness throughout the land and the breadth of Scotland. Sheep and lambs were killed on the moors, and the horses and cows perished also. Angus fled, but he returned again soon. The next wind that Bera raised to prolong her winter reign was called the sharp-billed wind. And so it's interesting, the Cailleach is also associated with the heron and comes in the form of the heron, associated with the crane as well, psychopomp. So this is the sharp-billed wind, which is also called the gobug, lasted for 9 days. And all the land was pierced by it, for it pecked and bit in every nook and cranny like a sharp-billed bird. I know that wind. It's not fun. Angus returned, and the Bera raised the eddy wind, which was called the sweeper. Its whirling gusts tore branches from the budding trees and bright flowers from their stalks. All the time it blew, Bera kept beating the ground with her magic hammer to keep the grass from growing, but her efforts were in vain. Her efforts were in vain. Sorry. Spring smiled in all beauty all around. Each time she turned away, wearied by her efforts, the sun sprang forth in splendor. The small, modest primroses opened their petals in the sunshine and looked forth from cozy nooks from that wind called the sweeper, and was that the sweeper wasn't able to reach. Angus fled, but soon returned again. And Bera was not yet, however, entirely without hope. Her efforts had brought disaster to mankind, and the weeks of leanness came on. Food became scarce, The fishermen were unable to venture out into the tempest that Bera had created and could get no fish. And in the nighttime, Bera and her hags entered the dwellings of mankind and stole away their food. It was indeed a sorrowful time. And Angus was moved for pity for mankind and tried to fight the hags of Bera. But the fierce queen raised the gales of complaint to keep him away, and they raged in fury until the first week of March. Horses and cattle died for want of food because the fierce winds blew down the sacks of fodder and scattered them over the lochs and the ocean. Angus, however, waged a fierce struggle against the 8 hags, and at length he drove them to the north, where they fumed and fretted furiously. Bera made a final attempt to defeat Angus and maintain winter's dominance. She gathered her hags and smote the clouds with her magic staff, creating the Black Tempest. Winter continued, and Bera borrowed 3 days from winter to balance the 3 that Angus had previously borrowed. These 3 days were the tempest spirits riding on black hogs, which Bera set free to wreak devastation. For the 3 days known as the Hog Days, they froze the land, killing many animals and people with their unexpected bleak cold. Bera's reign was now drawing to a close. She found herself unable to combat any longer against the power of the new life that was rising in every vein of the land. The weakness of extreme old age crept up on her, and she longed once again to drink of the waters of the well of youth. When, on a bright March morning, she beheld Angus riding over the hills on his white steed, scattering her fierce hag servants before him, and she fled away in despair. Ere she went and threw her magic hammer beneath the holly tree. And that is the reason why no grass grows under the holly tree. Bera's black steed went northward in flight. As it leapt over the loch, it left the marks of hooves in the side of the rocky mountain, and this spot to this day is named Horseshoes. She did not rein up her steed until she reached the Isle of Skye, where she found the rest on the summit of Old Wife's Bane Cailleach at Broadford. There she sat, gazing steadfastly across the sea, waiting until the day and night would be of equal length. All that equal day she wept tears of sorrow for her lost power. And when night came on, she went westward over the sea to the Green Isle. At the dawn of that day she drank of the magic waters of the Well of Youth. And I'm going to add a little bit to this story, which is called an excerpt from Marianne F. McNeil's Silver Bough, Volume 2. On the eve of Briege, the Cailleach recedes to the Isle of Youth. And in those woods lies the miraculous Well of Youth. And there, before the first glimmer of dawn, before any bird has sung or any dog has barked, she drinks of the waters that bubbles in the crevice of the rocks, and having renewed her youth emerges as Briege, the fair goddess, for whose touch makes the grass vivid green and starred with white and yellow flowers of spring. So that is the story of the coming of Angus and Briege. And I wanted to add that last little bit just to give some yummy texture to that transformation. There's another really great story that is in another video that I've made, a Sharon Blackie story of the regeneration of the Cailleach. And yeah, so there's a lot of beautiful imagery in there that I invite you to feel into. There's the white and yellow flowers of spring, those two colors being in a number of stories that I found associated with this time of year. And there's the holly tree with the hammer that is buried beneath it. Actually, when I got in those car accidents, the first accident, I pulled over and lay down on the ground. And when I had come back to my senses, I looked up and I was beneath a holly tree. Pretty sacred times. I'm curious what your associations with holly are, with the colors of white and yellow. So I honor this day of Imbolc, with a story about how Cailleach gave up her power. She couldn't fight against the power of spring anymore. And I invite you to sink into the parts of yourself that are the Cailleach, the parts of yourself that are the torchbearer, Angus, bringing the light, and Brige, who chooses freedom. And Brige and Cailleach being, in this story, being associated with one another, the Cailleach actually becoming the new life. So holding both what I talked about at the beginning, all this like destruction, this realm of destruction and death, but then also all the life and regenerative qualities of Brige, bringing the light, bringing the new life, those branches that fall into the ground and are broken apart by the mycelium and the bugs and animals, and become again nourishment for the tree, and the roots corresponding with those branches also dying and becoming nutrients. She is that whole process, and I invite you into connecting with Cailleach at this time of year, connecting with Cailleach around your grief work and your coming out of grief work. And that's what I wanted to share with you all today. Thank you so much for listening. And I invite you to sit with this story, maybe listen to it again. Check out the book if you can find it. I got it online, which is really awesome. You can get it, get an online version, which is cheaper. And I am so grateful that each one of you took this time to listen to the whole story, and I can't wait to share more stories with you. This has been Stories with Brew. Have a beautiful rest of your day, and happy Imbolc.